All right, I'm going to call the meeting to order. We've got people online. It is 6:02. I want to thank everyone for showing up. We have our finance committee members are here. We also have a number of members from the community, our staff, our board, and we will begin the meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance. And I'd like to ask our finance committee chair, Claude Bonchamp, to lead us in the pledge. To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Claude.
Thank you, Bill.
You're welcome.
Pretty good for a Canadian.
All right, let's verify that we have a quorum.
Director Cook,
Here.
Director Bill is absent. Director Commission,
Here.
Director Doherty,
Here.
President Van Vliet,
Here.
hearing for quorum met.
Now, Director Bill is on a trip, but he may be dialing in. Is there a way to find out if he's online?
I don't think he can dial in. I don't have a conference phone here, but he can do Zoom
To Zoom. Okay. Well, Jeff,
Yeah.
if you're out there, hi.
or Facebook. Yeah.
Okay, so this is a little different than our normal board meetings. Our board meetings are governed by Davis Sterling rules, and so typically when we have members come up, we can take the feedback and we can't get into a dialogue. When you have a workshop like this is tonight, where we're talking about the budget and have a workshop, we are actually able to engage in dialogue, and so we welcome the feedback that you might have. First, we want you to listen to the presentations. But we welcome the feedback that you might have and give us your input, your comments, suggestions on what to do and take that in. I will say one thing, and that is a number of people have said, could you put the budget out before this workshop? And the answer is, this is the first time that it's going, all of us are seeing the budget. So this will be presented to us. All of the rationale for the budget and the recommendations are in it. You're allowed to ask questions, have some give and take, and then it will not be voted upon until the March 4th meeting, the next board meeting on March 4th. So for the next 2 weeks, the board has the opportunity to still receive feedback from you. If you want it, this is a lot of information at once. You have the next 2 weeks to go over it and review it and provide your feedback to the board before we make the final votes. Okay. So with that, we'll turn it over to our controller, Susan Dawood, for an overview of the budget.
Good evening. Welcome, everybody. I'm so pleased to see so many people out for the budget discussion. I want to introduce our Finance Committee Chairman, Claude Bonchamp, sitting next to me. And he was instrumental in helping in the Finance Committee, everyone putting together this year's budget along with the managers. What we're going to do this evening is I am going to spend about 10 or 15 minutes just going through the highlights of this year's budget. And then at that point, I'll turn it over to Claude and he will fill you in on some of the procedures and processes and discussions that went on during the budget process. It's been a long budget year this year. We've had a lot of challenges, and I'm going to tell you about some of them now. We will look at the budget methodology we used, what the Finance Committee suggested as guidance. There are some very big economic challenges for this year's budget. Then we'll dive right into the departments and look at some of those details. Finally, we'll wrap it up with a discussion on the reserves. I wanted to mention a couple of methods to preparing a budget. One is called the zero-based budgeting method, and you hear a lot about this with homeowners associations in particular. There's two basic tenets to this budgeting method. Number one is that every expense and cost that you have in the budget is then offset by the exact same amount of income, which is where we come up with the assessment, the annual assessment each year. All homeowner associations do that as far as I know. The second tenet of zero-based budgeting is that the persons creating the budget would start with a blank slate. They would start with zero, and every account would have to be built from scratch with detail. I will tell you that that is very time consuming. So we use a more traditional method for getting our budgets out. If we were to use the precise ideal of the zero-based budgeting, our staff would have to look at 2,892 different GL accounts, build all the detail from scratch, and then come up with the final budget. So what does one do? This little minion is saying, well, what do we do? Well, we use a hybrid method. So what we do at the POA is we create a template for the managers to start their budget process. This year's template included factors such as inflation. We base that on labor indices and contract increases and market rates for different things such as building supplies. We were provided some guidance from the Finance Committee, and the Finance Committee spent a significant amount of time this year looking at several different indices. One member in particular, Bill Medved, really spearheaded this process and presented us with the guidance of a 3.9 suggested increase for salaries, a 3.5% suggested increase for expenses, and a suggested 3.8% increase for our amenity fees. Some of the indices that were looked at were the CPI of LA, the Building Cost Index, the DGS California Construction Cost Index, Social Security COLA, and the California minimum wage. If we used and were able to budget meeting these guidelines, there should have been a budget of $14,861,669 at the end of the budgeting process, which would have led to a 3.7% increase year over year from last year's budget. There are some big things to consider this year. We had some unusual non-controllable costs. Most notably was our insurance increase year over year of $304,000. I think most Californians understand and know what's going on in the insurance industry in the state of California, and we were no exception to being hit very, very hard with those premium increases. In fact, this was the second year in a row that we had been hit very hard with the premium increases. In addition to that, if you add up the basic salary and payroll taxes increase, that was $342,000. Employee workers' comp and benefits, our healthcare premiums went up by 12% year over year, would have added up to $117,000. And I need to mention a change in accounting process or accounting method for our small repair items. There was a big change during this current year where the board voted to not capitalize repairs that are under $5,000 each in cost. What that means is those repairs will hit the profit and loss statement and the operating budget. They will not be pulled out of the reserve account any longer. That takes effect on May 1st of 2025, the beginning of this fiscal year. The total for those repair items was $130,000. So you will see later in the presentation, there's an additional $130,000 in the operating budget due to placing additional repairs in that category. In addition to the others items that I just mentioned, we have had some large expenditures out of our reserves Most notably the road. We've had millions of dollars, I think a little over $8 million spent on road repairs and road improvements. Previously, we had some excess cash that was sitting in some interest earning accounts. And we were earning close to 5% the last few years on that amount of money. When that money was spent, the interest earnings went away. And that's contributing this year to about $400,000 less in income than we've had in previous years. So if items that are unusual, that don't have to face for this year, that's $1,294,000. That's a lot of challenges to face in one budget year alone. It's unusual, and it created a very interesting process this year in going through all of these items and analyzing our budget for next year. Those items alone would be a 9% increase over year in our budgets. And remember that we were provided with guidance of 3.7%. So you can see the gap that was created right away when we started the budgeting process. I wanted to give you a little bit of extra detail on the insurance coverage year over year. 2 years ago, the premiums were $700,000. Last year, $872,000. And this coming year, and this current year, our year ends in August each year for our insurance renewals. But this year it's $1,127,000, almost a 30% increase year over year, 1 year alone. The year before was a 24% increase. And we were lucky to get insurance this year, even at that price. We have put in the budget, I made a slight revision after the fires that we just recently had of an additional 25% premium increase for next year in our insurance, just because that is looking like that's what it's going to be. That's the contingency. If you were to say, well, how did that impact the monthly assessment? Last year, the monthly assessment was impacted by $3 a month for insurance alone, increases alone. This year, it's $4.43 just for the insurance increase, and that's per homeowner per month. So right away, we're facing, increased rates. The process this year, because it was so challenging, we had to do 2 rounds of budget prep. The first round, we were trying to grapple with all of these increases, trying to understand how we could fit them into a number that would be palatable for the community, yet provide all of the services that we have been providing for the community. The first round of budget, we came up with a 10.4%. Now, I'm just talking about operating budget at this point. A 10.4% increase year over year. The process is that the managers look at their own departments, and they then present the budget to Eric, the general manager, and that's how the budget is normally done. After we came up with this first preliminary budget, it became apparent that we needed to go back to the drawing board, see what else we could do. All of the managers went back to their departments. We reevaluated all staff, all expenses, all events that were on the schedule were looked at for their cost. And we were able to come up with a second, more palatable version. There's still an increase. It seems unavoidable unless we just don't want to do a lot of the things that we're doing with the POA. The second version has a 6.7% increase. It does include all of those things I listed that is causing the challenge and causing us to have to really look at what we're doing, how we're doing it, and if we can do things in a different way. So that's what we're presenting tonight is an operating budget with 6.7%. How does that compare to the guidance we were provided? In the guidance, we were provided with the salary increase of an optimal 3.9%. We were actually able to get that under the guidance goal. However, the insurance was more, and the operating expenses were 4.9 in this budget versus the guidance of 3.5. The income rate increase for the amenities, we had been provided with a 3.8% increase. And the managers came back after being challenged to look at everything with a magnifying glass. They came back with a recommended increase on some of the amenities that combined made an 8% increase in some of the amenity fees. And that's an average, so not all of them went up, but a lot of them did. Approaching the budget in this manner allows some of the burden to be allocated to the amenities that the members are enjoying specifically, so that not all members are paying for all amenities necessary. There's more of a burden sharing with the increase in the POA costs based on which amenities that each member uses. We felt like that was logical. In addition to reducing some of the expenses, watching our payroll salary costs, that was a necessary step to provide the membership with a realizable and an acceptable amount of increase year over year. So I want to go into the different departments now. I have a list of all of the departments and their budgets for this year compared to their budgets for last year. And I want to go into one or two departments in particular that have the largest variances. On this page, you can see that the corporate department went up by $755,000. That seems like a monstrous amount. However, that's where the insurance costs live. That's where legal costs live. And I'm going to give you some breakdown of that department. This is another shot of the different departments and how much percentage-wise that each individual department makes up in the budget. The largest departments in terms of budgeting are the corporate department, the operations department that provides the maintenance, community patrol that provides security, common areas, and the lake. This slide shows that most of the other departments are relatively insignificant in comparison to those 3 or 4 departments. It also shows that the campground is also in the positive. This year, we've budgeted a very small profit in the event center as well. Another view of the and the slice of the pie that they take up of the budget. 27%. Community patrol is 19%. Operations is 18%. The lake is 9%. In this slide, I'm showing you the increases in each department from one year to the next year. There are a few departments that actually decreased. Activities, or our new recreation department, actually decreased slightly. The restaurant is going down, is budgeted to be lower budget for next year. Operations shows like it's got a higher budget for next year. However, remember the $130,000 in additional repairs that we put in that department is causing operations to look like it's costing more money next year, but it's actually those additional items under $5,000. I want to show you the breakdown in the department. It's not just administrative. There's 36%. Let's see. Administrative is 44%. Insurance costs make up 30%, 36% of that department. In addition, the community patrol has had some administrative costs moved over to the corporate department. The HR department operates out of the corporate department, and also communications. Another breakdown of the corporate department, because it is the biggest department in terms of subsidy this year. There's salaries of 31%, insurance 36%, and operating expenses, which includes the legal and the bad debt, which are large numbers. So when you look at the corporate department, you'll understand that it's really 3 or 4 departments. All the expenses are being rolled up into one, but we do keep track of those items separately. I already mentioned the capitalization policy. This is just telling you that that $130,000 is now in repairs. And we're ready to move on to our reserve funds. We have 3 reserve funds: a repair and replacement fund, a road reserve fund, and a capital improvements project fund. I'll talk further about the repair and replacement fund just a little bit. There's a history here of the last 5 years of our contributions for all of these funds. This year, we are suggesting that there is $2,687,000, which is very similar to the previous 2 years, contributed to the repair and replacement funds. $2 million to go into the road reserve and $300,000 into the CIP. If all of these are approved by the board, along with the budget that had $15,288,000 that I just mentioned, that would make an annual assessment of $4,224 or $352 a month, which is a $17 increase or a 5.1% increase year over year. You have to think of where I started in this discussion and all of those large, heavy challenges that we were listing for you. And we started with a budget of an increase of 10%. Thanks to the efforts of the Finance Committee working on this budget, the managers working on this budget, the general manager working on this budget, and some input from the board, having a 5.1% increase, I don't know if you can complain too much about a 5.1 increase if you really understand everything that I've just said to you. So with that, I just wanted to show you one more thing regarding the if we make $687,000 contribution to the repair and replacement fund, we will end up with a 40% funded on the chart that we use to allow us to know how healthy our reserve funding is. And that would be for our first year, 25 2025 to 2026, it's a 40% funded, which is significant if you follow and keep track of how well financed we are and how much money we have set aside for all of the contingencies and all of the repairs and all of the common areas that we have. That assumption is built on a 5% increase return on our funds that are invested and a 1.5 estimated contribution increase each year. Those are the basic facts. That's the basic overview of the budget this year. The monthly assessment would be $352. And I'm going to turn it over to Claude now, who's going to discuss a little more about the reserve, I think, and also the budget process.
Thanks, Susan. Well, you described the process pretty well, but I'll just go through it very briefly. So what the Finance Committee tried to do is change things up this year, try and see if we can't improve the quality of the product that we're putting forward, which is the budget. Bill Medved had a great idea on this year over year. So we look at how we did last year at a very high level in three categories: revenue, salaries, and expenses. So everything fit into those three categories. So we looked last year, where were we? And then what are we willing to accept as an increase in each of those categories? And that's where Susan came up with she pointed out the 3.8, 3.5, and the other percentage. So as we were developing this within the Finance Committee, then Eric and his staff members were starting on their prelim budgets, going through it. After they completed it, then that was presented to the Finance Committee, where we reviewed it at that level. You saw the what was it, a 10 point something percent increase. So Finance Committee looked at it, analyzed it, and tried to propose some potential savings that we saw in there. We presented those potential savings to the board. They looked at it, and then they determined what kind of reduction in the preliminary budget that they're looking for. So then it went back to Bill and his managers to basically retool each of their departments. And Susan was instrumental in that. She met with all the managers individually and worked on reducing that. And I think, I forget the exact number, but I think we were able to hone down like $600,000.
530 something.
Yeah. Okay. So it was substantial. Past years, our approach didn't yield that great of a savings reduction. So I think we're on the right track going forward, and reviewing it a couple of times. So then after that was retooled and the Finance Committee reviewed it once more, and then we came up with, between that and the reserves, and then we came up with a final recommendation to the board, which brings us where we are here today, presenting that to the membership. So that's the process in a nutshell. And like I said, this is a change from what we had last year, and I think we'll be refining it for the coming years. But I think we're on the right path.
I think a lot of us were pretty shocked when we had a 10.4 or 10.7% increase year over year. So that it really did make the year a little different this year. I think that's it for us, Bill.
Okay, thank you. Well, one question, Claude. Are the recommendations provided here consistent with the Finance Committee? If you could just take a moment to describe what the Finance Committee recommendations were with respect to the overall budget and dues.
Can you clarify your question?
I just wanted to see if what's presented in here is consistent with the Finance Committee. So in past years, they've sometimes been the same, sometimes not. I just wanted to get clarification. Is this consistent with what our Finance Committee, who worked on it with the staff, is this consistent with their recommendation?
This is higher than what was originally. The original Finance Committee recommendation was 3.7 overall increase, and we're ending up with the 6.7.
No, that was I'm sorry, I'm not being very clear. That was the guidance for establishing the budgets. Once they did their 2-day I guess it was 1 day this year review, typically the Finance Committee will come up with adjustments to the operating account and then also to the reserves. And at the very end, you kind of tally up, and did it come up to monthly dues of $352 is the question.
There's a simple answer to that, and yes is the answer.
Thank you.
Throw
I'm sorry.
that last one. Okay. It's the last one. Okay, so
Hit your button.
Sorry. Okay. Sorry. So this is the recommendation that we put forward. So the operating budget came to 15.2. What was the original? It was in the high 15 millions. So we brought it down. With all the savings in that, the recommendation came out to 15.3 million. Okay, and then we also looked at the what? Oh, okay. And then we looked at the three different funds, capital funds. So the repair and replacement, we reviewed what the 5-year plan was for new projects and what the software said, were repairs due for the coming year. Now I know that's just an indicator, but that's not necessarily what happens. So, but for that reason, we were able to bring down, or we decided to bring down slightly the repair and replacement fund. So funding that rather than 2.77 million, we brought it down 2.687 million. So that sort of helped offset the increase in the operating fund. We raised the road reserve up to 2 million because there's a balance in there, and I believe that's what Eric said he would be spending. So to maintain that balance, we upped the road reserve a little bit. I think it was 1.7 to 2 million, and then the CIP, which really wasn't very active. We were funding it at $500,000, so we brought that down to 300,000. So that came out to a monthly assessment of $352 a month per member, up from we're at what, 335, right? So that's a $17 increase.
Thank you, Claude. Appreciate it. Before we go to comments from the community, I do want to take a moment to thank staff and the Finance Committee. In prior years, I've sat in these budget reviews for 3 years now, and typically it's been maybe a 1% delta or so forth from what the budget's submitted. This was a 50% reduction, so it was substantial, and it was due to a lot of hard work, a lot of new thinking. And I want to thank thank everyone on the committee and staff for really asking hard questions and addressing these, because we are living in an inflationary environment, and it's been tough on everyone. So thank you for doing that. True. Eggs. Yeah. Eggs and gas. I just got back from Texas last night, and I paid $2.49 a gallon for gas, and I just bought it today at Costco for $4.85 a gallon. It's like, wow. So, all right. With that, the purpose of a workshop is we threw a lot of information at you. We would like, if you would like to ask a question, comment, provide a recommendation, come on forward. Just state your name and let's have a discussion.
Good evening. I'm Dan Lekawa, and honestly don't remember my track lot number. A few comments. One of them is there's a difference between an unusual event and an unpredictable event. You mentioned a couple in particular. One is the insurance, which we've all seen trending up. You could have predicted, of course, a trend up for this year. Have you trended up enough for next year? Given what we just saw with the fires, you said 25%. That seems a little low, my personal opinion, from what I'm reading and hearing, and seems to understate the amount. The other one, I think, from a predictability standpoint, is you're drawing down on the road fund. We knew that. Those monies weren't going to be there for earning interest, and there will be less going into next year as you continue to draw down the money you settled with. As you do that, are you accounting for the fact that the further loss of interest next year as you do the roads? So there's two very predictable things that you ought to be able to fold into the budget. The third thing I have a question about, or a comment that I'd like you to understand, is last year you had a unusual event or an expensive event, not unusual, in that the remodeling of the lodge. You did a lot of baselining off of this year. Like you said, you didn't zero base, you kind of did a hybrid approach. So I would have expected, because you don't have anything going this next year that's of that magnitude, that you would have been able to account for and see a drawdown, a reduction in expense. And that expense, I believe, if I remember last year right, was a blend of reserve and expense. And as such, I would expect the reserve to be baked somehow in the reserve monies and the expense to not be part of the baselining for this year's budget, because you don't have that large of a remodel effort going into this next year.
Thanks, Dan, for the comment. I know you have a number of questions, but let's try and deal with them one at a time.
Okay. Are we
Question
doing
number
real-time
one.
responses of these, or?
Yeah, no, with the workshop, we're able to dialogue.
Perfect. Okay.
So question number one was insurance. I'm going to turn that over to our vice president here, who is our board expert on insurance, to answer that question.
Okay, good.
You're not supposed to use the term expert, but I'll let it go. They say timing is everything. And Susan mentioned this. The first go round in the budget, they had, I believe, a 10.7 increase in the insurance budget.
Oh, yeah.
And I sat there and I said to myself, I didn't know, no one knows if these numbers are going to be right or wrong. But after the between the first go round and the second go round, the fires occurred.
Okay.
And both our broker and Susan, working with the broker, upped that to 25. Now, whether that number is right or not, only time will tell.
Okay.
There's just, it's a.
Okay, but you did check with the broker, kind of got a projected. Got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I guess another thing is it can't go up forever. And in my experience, in my career, these markets go up, then they level out, then they go down, and then they go up, they level out. What's happening now with the climate change and weather change and all the things we've seen and read about, I think these increases are going to be more permanent, but I don't know. But I was happy to see that increase in between the two budget rounds.
Fair. That's good.
And so in response, actually, if you think about the $500,000 or so that you pulled out. It was actually more than that was pulled out because we had this increase to add another 15%, a contingency for rates going up again in the insurance for next year. So did we get it right? At the end of the day, it's a budget, and a budget is our best guess based on asking the experts. Okay, question 2.
The second question then was going back to a drawdown in the monies that were being invested for the street repairs and the loss of interest in that. Very predictable. That's something you knew you were going to expend on. Those monies were going to go away, and therefore you know that wasn't going to be earning interest on that. So have you projected into 2025 the same exact exercise?
I'll answer that if that's okay. So we had a litigation several years ago, and out of that litigation, we had received over $5 million. That's the money mostly it was road construction defect money. That was sitting in a separate pot. We were earning some bank credits and some interest on that money. And that money was used, and it was included in the $8 million I just mentioned that we had spent.
Right.
So it's really the loss of that 5-something million that we had that is causing less of earnings and interest.
But you're
The normal road reserve fund has its own road study and its own balances. And in terms of predicting going forward, that's why I'm predicting less interest earned, is because the road construction defect money is gone. But
so
that
I guess
answer
that
your question?
confuses me more than it helps me. Are you saying you drew from 2 funds and you expected to only draw from one originally? And therefore your earnings weren't going to be there on the other, or they were going to be there, and then you were surprised that you ended up having to pull that money?
It was totally planned. We could only spend that money on the roads. We were not allowed to spend it on anything else, and it was totally there. It just so happened we had it in a spot where I was earning interest for maybe 3 years.
Yes.
And then we knew, now we're budgeting for next year. We know it's not there. So we budgeted therefore not to include it.
Okay.
The other comment I'll add is in the budget, I know there was a budget model. And so interest rates were last year about 5%. They've come down about 1% or so this year. And there's a slope down to a lower level because the Fed is trying to get things down to a target of 2% or so. And so that projected interest model is included in the forward year projections.
Okay.
That was a year-over-year budgeted number, that's what it is. Last year we budgeted, in the current year it's budgeted, but we know it's not going to be there next year, so it's not budgeted.
Okay. And then I think the
Last
next
question.
Yeah, the next one I've had to do with last year, what you benchmarked off of in your hybrid model was included a very expensive remodel of the lodge. And that's a split between reserves and expenses. At least that's how it was covered last year.
It was reserve and capital improvements, not expenses.
Reserve. Okay, thank you.
Two separate reserve funds.
Were those in fact then discounted in the benchmarking of this year so that you don't have like there's when you benchmark, you'll say, okay, I'm going to be doing 10% over last year or whatever the number is, 5%. And you got a number. And then so next year it's like this. But if this number was unusually inflated because of a big event like the remodel.
Let me jump in on that. First of all, it was 2 years ago that we did the lodge remodel.
Okay.
It was 2 years ago that we did that. In the model, we take the board has developed a 5-year plan for anticipated improvements, both to existing things and or new projects coming on. And that is in the model. That's what goes in here. And so those expenditures are projected in the reserve things. And currently we're not planning, we're planning to spend within those reserves. However, there's an opportunity for the members of the community to comment. As you all hopefully received a survey in the mail. There's one more week to do the survey if you haven't yet responded. In the survey, we put all the things that were in that 5-year plan. And so we would love to get your feedback on, are those things, how do you feel about those? And that helps us then we can revisit the 5-year plan based on your feedback and adjust it accordingly.
Okay. And then a couple others. One was the,
If I can do one more thing, just because normally I'm going to leave people about 3 minutes
Okay,
because I
I'm
don't
sorry.
want you to monopolize. I don't, this is just be a discussion between us, Dan, and you.
yeah. I'm
So
sorry.
we'd like, let's give the opportunity to some other members of the community to comment and then you can come back.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Good questions though. And someone other than Dan's wife, maybe. I will get to you, Kathy. Anyone else have any comments, questions, recommendations for us? Come on up.
Hi, Jennifer Dane, 386918. My main question is this information available someplace where we can see it? It's just, I can't see it at all from back there. So we can actually look at all the details, like the details with the department, everything that you've shown here, and then what the proposed budget is by department. So we can look at all of that.
You should have received a handout when you walked in that has the department by department budget.
There wasn't anything out there, just a survey.
You know what? If you leave me your email, I will send you both.
Okay.
We can-
if it's put on the website, I can pull it up.
We
there.
can put it on, it's not currently on the website because you're getting it live. Everybody watching on Zoom and on Facebook Live right now, there's very small heads talking and a very large version
Yeah.
of that. So you can watch the Facebook Live and that screen is
Okay.
the biggest thing that we're streaming right now.
Okay.
Good question. Can we place this on the website for people to provide feedback? And again, over the next 2 weeks, give us your feedback. You can always write into the board, letters at board@kenyalakepoa.com, and give us your feedback based on the analysis. But that's a good suggestion. Thank you.
Okay. And I had one other question about the interest part of it. And I maybe just misunderstood the numbers that you were saying, but I think you said we're going to be down about $1 million in interest.
400,000.
Okay. I heard $1 million. That was okay. That makes more sense. Okay. Yeah. If we can,
The total of all of those items were over $1 million.
okay. Okay. Yeah. Excuse me. I think it would be very helpful to be able to see this information and the proposed budget by department to really look at, for the geeks of us.
It
that
was
likes to
our
look at it.
intention to have a handout and we had a miscommunication.
Okay.
So I do apologize
Okay.
for that.
No, that's fine. If we can get it at some point, that's good. Thank you.
Thank you, Jen. Anyone else?
I want to say one thing. Just go ahead and come up. Jen, just so you know, this is a proposal so far. So this isn't written in stone yet. So we're going to take your feedbacks. We're going to discuss it and then we'll come with a finalized number in March. So just so everybody knows that. So we want to hear your feedback. That's why we're here.
Hi, my name is Diane Whiteside. And I know that a lot of times there's unexpected expenses and inflation, like you're talking about with the fire insurance. But one thing that I'm just really concerned about is the rate of our POA dues and how much they keep going up every year. And I was doing a calculation of just 4% annually, for the next 10 years. And at just 4%, that'd make our POA dues like at $450 a month. I mean, a month. Because I look at things per month rather than annually. And I think probably a lot of people do. But so now we're at $350 in 10 years. And that's just at 4%. You were saying that with our increase that we're going to be having this year, that's going to be about an average of 5% year over year. And if it were to be 5% over the next 10 years, you're looking at even more than $450 a month in POA dues. Have you guys considered this, a long-term 10 years from now, what our dues are going to be and what's that going to do to our property desirability for people to want to come and live in Canyon Lake? I mean, even though this is a wonderful place to live with the lake and all, but it's going to be hard probably to sell your house or for people to come and live in here. And I'm really concerned about that. It's a very, very strong concern of mine. And one of the things that I was hoping to hear from everybody is about being as conservative as we can and about tightening the belt. No more money going to projects, to capital improvement projects. You know, like that has to stop for a few years to get this under control. And we're putting 300,000 into the CIP. And I don't know if that's going to be making it like $1 million then or something, because in last year's budget, it showed like 800,000 or something. Oh, 500. Okay. But I don't know how everybody else feels about it. I don't know if I'm, but we have a lot of amenities. I think we don't need to be building anything new or anything like that right now. We just got to get this under control and we got to slow it down. If we keep seeing 5%, this is going to be crazy. Anyways, the last thing that I wanted to mention was the survey. You put on there a few different options for people to choose how they would like to see our money spent. And some of it was like to keep our POA's dues or to have a slight increase, to keep things improving or whatever, right? And I don't think people are really understanding when you're asking them to have a continual increase about just what we're looking at 10 years from now. 10 years is just right around the corner. It'll be here before we know it. And I'm not sure people understand, where we're headed. If we continue, like I said, I was just calculating at 4%. I was hoping that we'd be able to get things under control to where we'd be at like 3% or less. But I now, with this fire insurance, I don't know, but I want to hear from the directors about what are we doing to decrease costs in light of maybe increased costs in other areas. We got to start cutting back in some areas. There's got to be some changes. And one last thing, you were talking about the budgeting. We're doing this hybrid budgeting. We really haven't gone through and looked at things like from a 0 cent, a clean slate. Well, maybe we need to start doing that. Maybe we need to just slowly over the next few years start tearing it down to the bottom and starting back up and really seeing where we can cut and because I just feel like this is just going to get to be too much for POA dues. So that's
Okay.
I just like to
Thank you for your comments.
hear your. I'd like to know: are you guys thinking 10 years out? Thank you.
I think yes. First of all, in response to your question, you're not alone. It is a serious concern for all of us. We realize we have young families. We have people on fixed incomes here. We have to take all of them into account in doing this. And so it's a very serious. It's one of the reasons we said, hey, we cannot tolerate a 10% increase, right? And we're able to get it back, but there are fairly large headwinds that we are dealing with. But so I want to give each of our directors an opportunity to respond to your question.
I was asked the other day in one of the committee meetings, gentlemen, insurance came up as it has tonight, more than once already. And I was asked the question, well, why don't we just self-insure? Just don't. And in particular, this gentleman focused on the fire insurance because fire insurance is a very big part of our current premium. For a couple of reasons. One is we have an older facility. Our community is over 50 years old. And generally speaking, the older buildings get, the less insurance companies are interested in them because things break. And the second reason, of course, you're all aware, is that we're surrounded substantially by BLM brushland. So the question came up, like I said, why can't we just self-insure? Well, the answer is we can't afford to self-insure. Now, that sounds funny. What does that mean? Well, we could absorb a $50,000 kitchen fire at the lodge. We could do that easily. We're a big operation. If we self-insured our fire insurance and the lodge burned down and it was a $5 million loss, that we couldn't afford. And the special assessment I don't even want to talk about it. And everybody would be upset. So, like I said, we really can't. Insurance is expensive right now, but it's still affordable to transfer the risk to an insurance company. If it becomes unaffordable, which I can't define for you here tonight, but if it quadrupled again next year or quintupled, well, then maybe there's something we could do to adjust our deductibles. But like I said, and I hope all this makes sense, we can't afford to self-insure. It doesn't make sense for us. We have, just to be clear, the past 2 years before this past renewal, we did take higher deductibles and we were able to keep the increases down to 6% a couple of years ago and 23% year before last. But this year, the marketplace caught up with this. But what we did during those other 2 years is we raised our deductibles and we did a bunch of tweaks and we kept the lid on the increases until this year. And it just caught up. We ran out of things to do. So I hope that helps.
Thank you, Diane, for that. And I understand where you're coming from. Nobody wants to see their costs go up. And I've been on the board for 4 years and I've been through this process and it's a challenge every time we get to it. And we just can't control our outside costs. And as good as we can do, the only way I see that we can hold things down is if we reduce or eliminate services. And I would hate to see that happen. But one of the things that makes us such a wonderful community is the services that are provided. And with labor costs, food costs, everything that go up every year, and it's only getting worse. I don't see it getting better. And one of the things I did a few years ago was did a study on our dues for 25-year period. And over that 25-year period, there was a number of 5-year increments where the dues were neutral. They just kept the dues at neutral. And some were significantly higher after that, obviously, because things had to be caught up. And I did an overall average on that over that 25 years, and it was about 4.5% that came out as if we raised the dues 4.5 every year in a nominal increase that people can absorb much easier than a big jump after 4 or 5 years of no dues. Then we would be right at the same point we were at that time. So here we are at, what is it, 6%? 5%. 5%. We're not far off that mark. I think we've done a great job in putting the numbers together, considering all the things that were outside of our control. So, as far as looking 10 years in advance, I'm not going to be on the board 10 years. That's a tough thing to do, to anticipate the future like that. But I think right now we've done a good job. So hopefully that makes you feel a little better. Thank you.
Diane, Joe kind of stole some of my thunder, but it was his spreadsheet you sent to me a couple years ago with the 4.5% increase every year. If we would have done that, started that 25 years ago, we'd be exactly the same point as we are right now where our dues are. So it's super important to have consistency, I think. I think that's the point, because we did have years where we had no growth, and the next time you know, they were coming back and adding 15, 20% growth the next year to make up for the year previously. And there were services lost in this community by landscaping, didn't take care of as much. And I'll be honest with you, it's taken 8-10 years for some of that stuff to catch back up to back to where it was in 2010, let's say. I think that one thing I'm super proud of, and I hear you. I plan to be here next 25 years and be retired here. But I agree with you. It's a struggle. When we first got wind of like 10% as a board, we challenged staff, Eric, finance, everybody, like, you can't do it. No. And we pushed back pretty hard. And we did that in this current budget year. We also challenged staff to go back and find places where they could cut now, not next year. Let's cut now. The insurance thing was huge. I mean, it's easy to say plan it, but we were pretty well dropped and had 2 months to find new insurance carriers. So we didn't have the flexibility. There weren't a lot of people that want to insure us. We're a big organization. So it really left us, kind of handcuffed, and we're hoping we go back this year and renegotiate and we get more favorable terms, which will help that. The operating expenses were something that it's difficult. It's just hard to absorb. With the reserve studies, there's a little more here. We're really tight on that. We did lower the CIP. For the most part, the community is pretty well built out. We don't see a whole lot of new projects in the future. So we want to make sure we're, funding repair and replacement. That's our legal obligation as board of directors to do that. The road reserve, we all know we're chasing our tail a little bit on roads. There's some streets that need to be done more than others, and we're going to continue doing that. At a $2.5 million pace every year to try to get up to speed where we need to be. So we did drop down CIP just for that same reason you're saying that. Hey, and if you've noticed anything on the board here over the last year, our board meetings are pretty quiet because we haven't been approving any projects. So we've definitely been pulling back the reins for the last 9 months to 12 months. So we hear you loud and clear. Thank you, Diane.
And if you could please put up the chart on the disproportionate increases by department. Just to answer your question, Diane, specifically, if you look at this bar chart that you got in there, and the blue is what was in last year, and the yellow, or the orange rather, is what's projected this year. Everything is down except for two areas, really. One is the corporate, and that $400,000 is really big insurance delta that we're anticipating again. And then the other one is in operations, and that has to do with the change in the accounting rules of how we expense capital items, and also utilities. Utilities continue to go up too. And so other than that, everything else is, we've cut everything to go less than that, because again, it's our top concern. And as Alex said, we are cutting back on projects. We will continue to do that if that's the feedback and advice that we get from the community. Director Bill is online. And he's not able to talk through that little camera that's on top, but he did text me his comments. So just so that you heard from all 5 directors. He said, we have backed off and continue to back off on large projects. Unfortunately, fixed costs are fixed costs. To Joe's point, he'd rather take a small bite each year over year than get a large increase or a special assessment. And so again, it is top of our mind. We appreciate your comment. I know there's many people in the community that feel the same way, and it's something that we continue to struggle with. And for all members, again, if you have any comments tonight, all through until our next board meeting, March 4th, we're open to those comments. But
I listened to your answers, and it seems to me that by what you answered, it misses, because I know what she's talking about. She was really asking, what are the controllable costs, discretionary spending? That's what everything you've talked about is things we can't control, or we can get a better look at them a little closer, sharpen your pencil, maybe get it down a little. Now, what she's talking about is just spend. We got the stuff on our survey here. What would you like to see in the next 5 years? None of them. None. You don't do any of this stuff. We
They give us
keep-
that feedback and we
Yeah, no,
will,
we keep,
if the community responds to that feedback, we will certainly
yeah, we keep.
listen
we-
to it.
Yeah, we keep everything we have, all of our amenities in nice shape. Something needs to be welded, fixed, that can be done. Okay, if it has to be replaced, that's still a repair and replacement. I'm talking about some new entity, like we want to, hey, somebody wants a golf course bunker renovation. Is that something that has to be done? Can we just keep our other one, whatever I don't know about bunkers too much. I should have picked a different one. Golf field, artificial turf. We can do without that. We don't have to have that. That's these, but I'm talking about somebody else is going to dream something up between now and 2 years from now. I'm talking about you absolutely put the brakes on anything new. Nothing. We have nothing new. That's the rule for, you guys would determine how long it would take to just don't, there's nothing new bought. It's like, hey, related to, you got a car that's 5 years old and you want to get a new car. Okay, well, don't get the new car. Keep that one, repairing it, make it run for you, get you from A to B, and that's it. Now you don't have any car payments. Your insurance isn't as high. And it's just like that. You don't have to buy new stuff. We're talking, we're saying stuff here's,
Bob, I think we get your point.
you see what I'm talking?
We get your point. So we don't need to go down every item in the survey, but we would love to hear your response to the survey online.
Yeah, all right.
or-
Well,
or in that.
that's it though. New.
But I think to your point again, that's one of the reasons that the CIP is really for new projects, and that's one of the reasons the CIP was actually dropped, was to reduce that. There are some things that are bought. For instance, we just bought 2 new speed trailers. That's a new thing you have to purchase. So that comes out of CIP. There are some things that we do because our old ones are failing. So there are some expenses that we go through, but it's recognized, and that's why the finance committee and the board agreed with that. Let's get into the survey later. I want to give everyone else a chance to talk too, as opposed to just debate this one item. But we do hear you. Thank you.
I'm Jude Donahue, 3868-579. I'm on a committee. So I have a couple of concerns. One about the survey. And when I opened it up, I'm going, wow, I'm on a committee. I've been here for almost 30 years. These are vague questions. So to help you guys out with your surveys, I don't know how many you've gotten back or you anticipate getting back, but if I was a 40-year-old or a 50-year-old or a 30-year-old and I had kids and I'm running to soccer practice and baseball and working, I don't know if I'd pay a whole lot of attention to the survey, but just one of the first sections was, would you like minimal amenities and minimal raises in your dues? And then, when it gets down to the 6 different things, it was like, do you want resort type amenities? And dues are not a big deal in a sense. And I'm going, yeah, I know kind of a lot about how this place works, but I wasn't sure which one to pick because it has nothing to reference how much your dues are going to go up or even an inkling of how much they would go up. I agree with Bob and Diane as far as the bunkers and then there's the country club. I know the kitchen's small and it needs to be redone, but I think they want to push some things out and it's going to be a $2 or $3 million thing, I think. And for every, 57,000 or something, it's $1 per month. I'm going, whoa, and I asked a few younger people and a few older people that are on fixed incomes, what do they think of the dues going up? And they go, some of the younger ones go, I've lived here for a long time and we love the amenities and I love the amenities. And they said, some of them said, no, they didn't care. But most people said they did care. Okay. So I don't know how many surveys you're going to get back, but I've done a lot of asking people things. And like the golf field is a good example of the lights are archaic, that we need to put some new lights in there. We don't need AstroTurf. If you put AstroTurf in there, all the kids are going to need 2 sets of cleats, and that's silly because they're just kids learning how to play baseball. Okay. So like, yeah, we need the lights, but is that a repair and replace, or is that coming out of new monies? I'm not sure about that.
Appreciate the feedback. And yet, to the last question you asked, the lights is part of the repair and replacement.
Okay.
And that is currently scheduled for this next fiscal year.
Okay. That's a good thing.
The AstroTurf, which has been brought up a few times, was actually something that was actually 5 years out. And one of the reasons we wanted feedback on that is because it's a big expense, but it's way out there in time. It's nothing that's going to impact
Right.
the near term.
Right. And another thing I kind of heard was it won't be too long before we're going to see $500 a month on our dues. So for some of us, that would be okay. And for a lot of us, it may not be okay. So if we can pull back, and I agree with these guys, if we can pull back on things like bunkers that maybe don't have to be redone, just some tweaks here and there, maybe we can recover some of that. So that's all I've got to say, I think.
We appreciate the feedback, Jude. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Kathy wants to come up. Come up, Kathy. Got her to sit as long as she could stand.
That's still on, yeah. I'm Kathy Lekoa, 3778008. I have a few questions, but I think some of them are easy. There was a lot of numbers tossed around. It was hard to read, so I apologize. What are the salary increases projected for this coming year?
3.9% was recommended by the committee, and we're planning to adhere to that.
So 3.9, okay. How does the 40% reserve compare to where we were 2 years ago? How is the 40? There was a chart that said we're going to be at 40% reserve, and I don't know the math in it, but how does that compare to where we were like 2 years ago? Yeah. Yeah, well, I don't know what good is. So I just was wondering, like, is that good? Are we happy?
Off the top of my head, we were in the mid 30s and now we're up in the mid 40s.
Okay, that's good news. I just didn't know what good was. I didn't know if 80% was good or.
Just to clarify that's been like an ongoing debate. You know, do you put in too much money? It's not a good use of money, but you have to cover your repairs and things that come up. So after a lot of deliberation, I think what we with the finance committee had suggested to the board that we consider ourselves good if we're between 45 and 65%.
Okay, so 40% is still not good.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have more work to do the following year. How does it compare to where we started or where we were a year ago? We trending down, or we did we hit rock bottom and trend up?
Both budget books up. So 2 years ago, we were at 47%. Last year, we were in the 30s and we're back up. So we are trending up.
Okay.
And the way the projections on the reserves, the reserves actually went up was to help build back the reserves while we are curbing spending.
Yeah, no, I think that's important. I was suspecting that was the case, that we kind of went down and now we're going back up.
And that's not unusual. Just let everyone know, a reserve account is like a savings account, right? And it's not unusual when you have a large expenditure, you'll draw down your savings a bit. But then if you're being fiscally responsible, you'll ease up on some of your expenditure. If you remodel your house, you'll spend some of that money. But as you over the next couple of years, as you get into it, you don't spend as much and you come back. And that's really what you're seeing is you'll see things ebb and flow over time.
Okay. What is in the capital improvement budget for this next season? This next year, we heard it was down because we don't have the lodge improvements and other thing, but what is in it?
Year?
Yeah.
Question is, what's in CIP for next year?
Big ticket items.
What is proposed is never in it until the board votes upon it. Let's see. Outrigger Trail improvements to changing that from the weed patch it is to a walking trail on that. And I think that's about it for capital improvement projects.
Okay, that's pretty
It's 70,000.
minimal. Okay.
And it's what's proposed in the budget, not necessarily, it's never done until it's voted upon and approved.
Got it. And then one last question, I promise. I'm worried a little bit about the road budget. We depleted the one account now. What percentage complete do we think we are by, I don't know, miles, square feet, whatever we measure, versus what percent we have spent?
If you count all of the parking lots, which was our first large pavement project, kind of at the tail end of the litigation, we did all the major parking lots. That was about 3 million. Then year one was, I want to say 6 million, Steve. Yeah. And then year two was last year was 8 million. Correct me if I'm wrong, Steve. I think we've done the math, and if you count the parking lots and the roads, which are all asphalt, we've done about 40% of the asphalt that we own. If you take the parking lots out and you look at just the 37 miles of roads, we're substantially less than 40%. But all of it's asphalt, all of it gets paid for out of the road reserve fund. So the asphalt that we own, which is 16 parking lots and 37 miles of roads, we're at 40%.
So we're 40% complete, and how much percent spent?
Well, that goes up cost of petroleum, asphalt is a petroleum product. So, I don't understand the question.
What's in the road plan
Yes.
was once we had the settlement from the lawsuit, we were going to spend that chunk of money to get the big chunk, get the 40%.
So we did Happy Camp renovation, which took care of that part of our 37 miles of asphalt, right? Because there's streets inside Happy Camp. Then we did our parking lots. Then we did year one, 6 million. Then we did year two, 8 million. And the plan after that, because we knew that the funds were dwindling down, was to put 2 million a year into that account and spend 2 million a year until we get where we want to be. And it's a never ending project.
Okay.
Our asphalt engineers, pavement engineers do a pavement condition index, and they go and assess, and we just updated it this last July. They go and assess the condition of every road in Canyon Lake. Well, the roads that we did this year are at 100%, right? Next year, when they look at them, those roads will be in the 90s. And so the roads are continually deteriorating from sun and traffic and everything else. And so when we get done spending $2 million a year from here on out for the next decade, doing our 37 miles, we start over. It's our largest asset.
Okay, so just quick math. If we spent 14 million and we're about 40% complete, we have another, say, 16, 17 million to go.
At today's cost.
At today's cost. So
Right.
let's just call it 25 million at 2 million a year.
Probably at least, yeah.
So at 2 million a year, it's going to take us about 12 years to finish the roads.
Yep. And then we start over.
Okay, so okay, got it. Thanks.
And back onto that, part of that is what we've been doing is in our year one project, we did $6 million worth of work. In our year two project, we went back and put seal coat on the year one streets, which is essentially sunblock for the year one projects to make them last longer. In our year three project, which we're planning $3.5 million right now, we will also be going and doing seal coating on everything we did this year. And so it's part of a comprehensive pavement management plan, and it's never ending.
All right, Saul Linver, 3868-142. Couple things real quick. You mentioned that you looked at several COLA. Was it LA? I think you mentioned LA's COLA.
CPI of Los Angeles, and then the Social Security COLA for the salary increases.
And what were those at?
I did not bring that with me. Bill, do you have that?
2.5, 2.25?
Social Security, POA for January 2025, which is when we built the model, is 3%. California minimum wage, which depends on, Eric can probably explain this better than I can, where they work. It went up 6.9%. The California Construction Index went up 4.69%. Employment Cost Index for LA went up 4.5%. And the Consumer Price Index went up by 3.6%. Those were the indices we used. I can publish the URLs for all of these indices.
Okay.
And if anyone's interested in, if you ever want to attend a finance committee meeting, that's kind of what it sounds like.
Exciting stuff.
And then there was also a comment that amenities are going to take a hit, go up. Can you give us an idea of, are we talking about lake access? Those fees are going to go up. Are we talking about permits? Are those fees going to go up? Can you kind of give us an idea of what we might be seeing?
Yes, that was in the handout that didn't make it tonight as well, but we'll put that online for you. But basically, all of the fees, without exception, were increased somewhat, and just at different varying rates, including, I'll give you one example. Monthly payments are allowed on the assessments, and normally for years, I don't know how many years, the charge for an installment charge for the privilege of making it monthly instead of annually was $5, and that's gone up to $7. And that's just one example. So pretty much across the board, it was necessary to shave off. We shaved off $960,000 by implementing increases in fees and cutting costs, a combination of both of those things, just to make up for the insurance that we've talked about. So in answer to your question, I think you can expect an increase in all fees.
I'm going to piggyback a little bit on that. We looked at all the fees for all the different amenities, and I'll use the lake as an example. That cost goes up every single year, and that's with our lake lease, and it's contracted. And we really kind of made a conscious decision that not everybody, needs to pay for those subsidies. And so the people that are buying boats are probably going to be paying more for the lake than the people that don't have boats. And that was the same thing with the golf course. Water costs went way up this year. We had no rain. And so that was a huge, and so we definitely are trying to make sure that the people that are using those amenities have some ownership there and help pay for some of that stuff versus the people that don't use the amenities and, punish them that they don't use it. So that was kind of our thought process. So you will see that.
Yeah, and we will post those fee schedules online as well. Anyone else? Dan, I shirked you before. You're welcome to come back up if you have any more questions. Okay. Okay.
Hi, Bill Medved, 868. Yeah, that's it. By the way, I'm a software engineer and she QA software, so we have some interesting conversations. There's one thing I want to explain that's a little subtle. We actually, when Susan talked about things that cost $5,000 or less, we aren't going to capital expense that. What that means is if you buy a $5,000 laptop, the lifetime of it was, the cost of it was amortized over a number of years. So really that would come out of the reserve fund. Instead, it's going to come out of operating expense. It's a net neutral impact to our overall cost. Does that make sense? Okay, thank you.
It's the funds. It just moved from one fund to another
They
fund.
moved it from the left pocket to the right pocket.
I'm going to ask a question because I don't know this answer. Since we moved that from reserve fund and we move it to an operating fund, will that help our reserve study?
Yes.
I thought so. I just wanted to make sure.
Well, but we did reduce the funding by that $100,000. So if we're not funding reserves, how did it help?
Some of the assets values were updated. So
Right. Yeah. Right. No, that's fine. It just, we took those items out but we're not funding for those items because they're coming out of regular maintenance. Okay, thank you.
Things that fall into that, computers is one thing, but another item that falls into that capital expense, chairs. When chairs break at the restaurants or other things like that, those are typical things that will not be capitalized and just paid for out of operating expenses. Any other questions from the audience? I have a 3-part question from online that I'll read out. This is from Jeannie Odell. What direction has been given to staff regarding potential reductions in operating budget as a means to offset a portion of the proposed dues increase? For example, has staff been directed to compile scenarios regarding a potential 5, 10, 3% decrease in operating budget for 25, 26, so on and so forth? The answer to that question is yes. When the first budget came through, it was a 10% increase, and staff was told, no, you need to cut $1 million out of it, and they were able to do that. And the results were shown earlier today. Number 2, the easiest way, but not the only way to minimize the dues increase each year is to continue to reduce the reserve fund contribution. Has the impact of any proposed reduction in the reserve funds been studied by the Finance Committee? And the answer to that is yes. The ad nauseum, according to the finance chair. We had very long meetings. And there were 2 outcomes that came from that. One is actually 3. In the three funds, the repair and replacement fund was actually reduced by $130,000 because of this capital improvement treatment that we talked about. The road budget was actually increased to $2 million from 1.6 because in order to keep up with the 12-year plan of doing that, it was really funded at too low a level, and the capital improvement budget was decreased by $200,000. So those were some of the things that the Finance Committee did look at and provide feedback. And the final question, has the board considered the impact of proposed salary increases for management positions as a portion of the dues increase, and if the salary increases can be deferred as a means to reduce cost? This is a tough decision to make, but one that many have faced in our careers. And that's something that's a continuing discussion that we are looking at. And that comes to is if you're able to achieve reductions, is there an incentive-based system and so forth? That's something that's a topic that's been under consideration and discussion with the board. And that's a way, again, to continue to put an emphasis on, hey, cost management is a top priority. So all of those things, I believe, have been discussed. Anyone else want to add a comment? I don't have any other from online. Ooh. Anyone else? Speak now or forever hold your peace. Not forever. I was being facetious. This will be posted online. You have 2 weeks. It's a lot of information to absorb. And I know when I went to go get my mail today, one of my neighbors said, just vote no. And the answer is, well, unfortunately, this isn't a yes or no vote on it. It's a difficult thing. We want to minimize cost increases, but we have to be able to pay for it to keep out things running to the level that our homeowners want it to do, to be done, and to keep our values up. Your opportunity to provide feedback over the next 2 weeks. Look at it online, give us your feedback, send it to board@canyonlakepoa.com, and we'll do it. But Jude looks like she has another comment.
I just wondered how many surveys you have gotten back from the community. Because it's a kind of an important survey, but
Sure.
I don't just.
So the question is, how many surveys have been received? I'll tell you this: when it was done 8 years ago, we got 7% of the homeowners. Okay, so fairly low level. Tiffany, do you have a current estimate?
Oh,
That's good. So 17%. Now recognize when we try and vote and there is an election coming up, we struggle to get 20% even, so forth. So I'm really encouraged to hear that we've got 17%. That's great news. If you know anyone who has not submitted it, please do. This is the way to get your voice in. So great job. And thanks for that.
thank you guys for everything you guys do.
You bet. Thanks.
Thanks.
Anyone else? Sure. Yeah. Yep. I think we have, but we'll continue to, yes. Saving the best for last, Dana.
So I've got to ask about the couple of the amenities we seem to spend a lot of money on and don't really get the return as members, but the restaurants. What did we budget to lose this year, let's say at the lodge?
Can you put the pie chart up?
No, there was nothing at the door. I don't have any information and I could barely read what's up there.
Let me read it to you if you want me to. So the Lighthouse Restaurant has been budgeted for a subsidy of $254,000. The meeting rooms at the lodge, however, we are anticipating to become positive on the event center by $81,000. The country club is budgeted at $388,000 as a subsidy.
Okay. And what were the numbers that we actually will lose on that?
You're talking about the current year financial statements? Are you?
Yeah, this last year.
I don't have that with me. I can pull it up if you like.
I would love that.
Okay.
While she is doing that, I will tell you this. The Lighthouse Restaurant represents 2% of the total. I know we get a lot of feedback, particularly about the restaurants, but I also want to put it in perspective as to how much that's impacting the overall news. It's 2% of the total is the Lighthouse Restaurant, and the Country Club Restaurant is, I can't find that one on here. Does anyone have that offhand? Also 2%. So the restaurants combined are 4% of our total.
Okay. So over the fiscal year, the loss would be, do we have that number? Yeah. Which is great.
I think it's also
no problem with that.
It's also important to point out that now that in the last couple of years, we've separated banquets and event center from the lodge restaurant. So they're two different things here. So now we're showing a positive income for events like weddings, things in this room, it's the same employees. So that's showing a positive of $84,000 in our budget versus the $250,000, I believe, in the Lighthouse. So technically, if you looked at it as a whole, you're looking at $170,000 subsidies for the year.
That's budgeted subsidies. What's the actual losses is what I'm trying to get at.
I have those pulled up if you're ready for us. The Country Club Restaurant, this is through December, is a subsidy of $368,000. The event center at the lodge has actually already had a positive result of $9,541. And the lodge has had a subsidy through December of $340,000.
Is that including the budgeted $250 in there? Okay, because those are controllable costs. And I don't know that we're doing too well with controlling those costs. So that's definitely a big concern. I think we've all been in here and seen way too many staff. We've seen a lot going on where there's a lot of wasted money. We just invested $3 million into the facility. So it's more usable by us, yet we close early. We are not open many days. We're not open any daytime days, but I don't believe we're open tonight. Couldn't go in there and get dinner. So those costs, if we're
So we're not losing money.
Those are controllable costs. When you have a subsidized restaurant, every hour you're open costs money. So
So does any restaurant. So does any restaurant. But we're losing money. We're not even thinking of breaking even. We're just losing money. And we're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars additional in insurances, but we're not worried about the hundreds of thousands of dollars being lost at the restaurants.
That's not true. I will say that's not true. We aren't worried about it.
I would love to.
Let me finish. Because as part of going through this process, and we put I'd say come January, put an additional emphasis on cost control and cost management. And some of the things, again, I'll give credit to Susan, the controller, and the finance committee. They came up with some very good templates for us, took a hard look at what our costs are versus our income. And they now have a better management tracking system in place that we haven't really had before, that allows us on a daily basis to assess what is the cost of the labor, of the food, of the liquor, and so forth, versus the income that's attained. That in turn will help us determine what hours are available, because there's some times where you may have a large staff and there's not much there's not enough patronage to substantiate that. So we anticipate seeing an improvement in that. We've just started implementing it over the last couple months. But that is going to be a practice and a process that has been put in place recently that we plan to include to increase the management efficiency over the next year.
I will say that I just implemented that tracker February 1st, and we're just going through it now daily, watching the labor costs to compared to budgeted, what they schedule against what the actual numbers are. I give them their actual numbers the very next day. So those analytics just started, and it's just the beginning. When we had to go through the restaurant and the budget revision for the second time, that had to be a part of it, is we had to have a process, or I couldn't in faith reduce the budget the way we did it without knowing that we were having something put into place that's a little bit different than we've had before. I will also mention that I'm going to be sharing my data with the communications and the advertising piece of the restaurants. We've already started talking a little bit. It's just begun. In fact, we're trying to really make a dent in this year's operations on the financial statements, not just waiting. We're trying to practice and cut this year's costs so that we can go into the next year and actually be able to meet the budget. So it's not being ignored. There are some steps that have recently, it's just very recent, and hopefully you'll see some changes.
Well, that would be great to see some changes, but just recently doesn't take care of all the losses in the past. It just seems to be something that has not been done, should have been done, and anybody that's been in the restaurant industry would know that and do that. And it just doesn't seem like we have the people that are, and love all you guys. That's not a thing. There's no issue with anybody, but I just see losses in places that probably shouldn't be. I mean, we should probably budget to lose zero. If we lose $100,000, well then, hey, we have to look at why we lost that. And there's got to be some sort of performance issues. And that's across the board, I would think. Just kind of odd to me that we accept losing so much.
Argue with you too much about that, but the steps have been taken, and there will always most likely be a subsidy on the restaurants. We just have to get to a manageable subsidy.
I understand that, but this isn't, most restaurants, they get charged rent, for an example. This restaurant does not, and still loses that. For somebody to pay that amount of money for a location like this, beautiful location that just got a free $3 million renovation to it, and then we're still losing that money, just doesn't make sense. Subsidies, I understand, we're in an association. Everything's subsidized, but not to that extent. Let me ask another question. It was brought up about salaries. Were salaries looked at as far as staff and what, all right, I should probably ask, are we in line with what salaries are across the board in other associations or similar types of organizations?
I'll tell you from a management standpoint, the board gets involved with management salaries. I'm a comp committee chairman on a couple of boards, private company boards, and so I've subscribed to a national 800-page document that lists everyone from the C-suite down to first level managers and tells you what the curves are for based on number of employees, average revenues and things like that. We take that into account when we establish that. We give it to the general manager. He does that as well and manages that. And so I guess I would say based on where we are, at least at the management level, I do know we are at or below industry standards.
Okay, was that looked at as part of the budgeting?
It was since we are at or below, they also took a look at they kept the increase below the increase within the standard increases that they are. So if we were already within the range,
Yeah, I don't think, I'm not
and
asking
the
about.
increases we're doing that we did that. I'm sorry, maybe I don't understand the question.
Yeah, I'm not asking about a standard increase, cost of living increase. Are those levels that corporate is being paid, whether it be attorneys, the general manager, the whoever it may be, are those levels at a consistent level in different associations?
Yes, in our experience, the answer is yes.
Yes, I'm on the board of directors for California Association of Community Managers, and our association has about 2,500 community management professionals in it. Our association did an industry-wide within our 2,500 management companies and managers salary compensation review. We also, I think it's been 3 or 4 years now, the POA contracted with a compensation analyst, and they gave us compensation analysis of all the positions within the POA, and we, like Bill said, we're confident that we're right on target in both cases.
Okay. I've got other questions, but I won't ask now.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you.
Since it was brought up about the lodge and our subsidy and how much we're subsidizing the restaurant, and I think that a lot of people are feeling that we wouldn't need to subsidize this facility or the country, maybe not so much the country club, but if there was a better consistent quality of the food, or even perhaps a different menu altogether, maybe foods that would be more popular that people would like to buy. And I'm just wondering if you've gotten any feedback on that as far as the consistency and the quality of the food there, or the items that are being offered, if that needs to be revamped, and that would perhaps help to subsidize or lessen that subsidy on that facility. Thank you.
Diane, we put in place now that both the lodge and the country club are getting revamped menus every year. They were stale. And if you've gone recently over even the last 2 weeks, there's a lot of new menu items on at both restaurants. We are trying to change it up. We're trying to find what works, find out maybe there's new things. I know at the country club, the Nashville chicken sandwich is a favorite. It's not on the menu, but it's on their secret menu. So you can always ask for it and get it.
All right.
So that we are addressing that. And if anybody knows me, I've been in the restaurant, or not, I'm not in the restaurant business, but I've been a voice because I do frequent both of them a lot. And so we're definitely trying to do that. And I've been trying all the new menus. And I mean, here they have lamb chops now. If you like a little lollipop lamb chops, they have a chef salad. There's a bunch of different things. It's not completely redone, but I agree with you. We agree with you that there's places to be better in the restaurant world. I don't think anybody disagrees with that, and we're doing that. And if you look at the budget, if you look at last year's budget with the Lighthouse, I'll be honest with you, it was a shot in the dark. It was a new facility. And when we were budgeting and trying to figure out where the dollars and cents and how we're going to do it, and us as a board felt that service was probably needed to be great. The last thing we wanted to hear about is not getting served or not getting attention or anything like that. So there was an influx of probably too many employees at times here at the lodge. And it's a younger staff here versus the country club is a more seasoned staff. So that changes it also. So we've definitely been aware of that. I want to point out that next year's budget subsidy for the lodge here is down 16%. So it is taking a less of subsidy. I mean, that's the goal. I mean, before the Lighthouse and the Country Club, and if you guys were here 6, 10, 8 years ago or whatever year, it was golf course, golf course, golf course, golf course. We're paying too much to subsidize the golf course. It's not a conversation right now because we did lower the subsidy every single year on that golf course. And now the Lighthouse, well, if you take it with the event staff center, it's 1.5% of our total budget, 1.5. So we need to take it in perspective, like, okay, where do we go trim the fat? I mean, it is 1-2% that we can get better at. And we are working at that. You got to trust us. We spend a lot of time talking restaurants.
Okay.
So, I mean, and I always try to put in perspective that and I said this a couple years ago, we look at all these amenities of like having multiple kids. Can't treat them the same. They're all different. And you kind of have to hold your hands and figure out their needs and wants and so forth. So that's what we're trying to do.
Well, I would just ask if you could continue to take surveys of the items on the menus at these restaurants to get feedback from the people who are frequenting them as far as, what they like and what they don't like, suggestions on what to add or take away. It has been a few months since the last time we ate at the lodge because none of us liked any of the food that we were served, unfortunately. And so when that happens, you tend to be leery about going back, thinking that, it's not going to be good again. But you're saying that the menu got changed. How long ago did it get changed? Or
Maybe a month.
A month ago. Okay. But anyways, I would just suggest that if you could do that to get feedback on how people are liking the menu and the quality of the food, I think that'd be really helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. I'll add one comment to Alex's, and that is the one thing that can help from a subsidy standpoint is to patronize them. If more people were to use them, that would be helpful. And we have 2 members on our finance committee that have an excellent restaurant background. One of the things they recommended was, hey, let's advertise more. Let's advertise specials and things like that. And if you haven't noticed, over the course of the last month, the POA is sending these out on a weekly basis. Every Thursday, if you subscribe to the newsletter, it's out there. And so they are doing some things. And so the best thing we can do as owners of this is to leverage it. I know we certainly, Alex does. My wife and I, we eat in the restaurants every week, and we like it. So that's the best thing that we can all do. Thanks. Question.
Okay. So talking about the restaurant, I was going to say anything, but if I owned the restaurant, I wouldn't be open just, for 33 hours a week. It shouldn't be open, especially since times are changing. We need to make more money. It should be open like a regular restaurant. Or also like, I was going to come here on Wednesday and I was excited. I was bringing family to come visit. We're going to go on the boat and come eat at the restaurant and it's closed. So it's like you have to be open when you say you're going to be open. This is a restaurant. And it's like you treat it as if it's your own restaurant. You own it. And then like you say with the food changing, like they changed the pizza crust. Now it's cardboard crust. And I used to love the pizza here. And the last time I came here a couple of weeks ago, because I love this place. I want to support it. I love this restaurant. It's a bit of paradise here. So I think that maybe my recommendation would be to have, just like we have finance committee, we should do a restaurant committee and have volunteers come and help out. And then also make it separate. Laura shouldn't be in charge of this event. She should just be in charge of the restaurant. Have 2 different people taking care of it and report directly to Eric, where it's separate. And then also maybe Paul can have him come over here, help out, since it's both restaurants are owned. And let's say we're short-staffed here, call some people and call Paul and say, hey, how's business over there? Can we have some of your servers come over here and work together as a team? So I think that that's something that we could do. And then also another thing too is like, people are complaining about it. You look online and they don't want to say anything or whatever. If we did like what we're doing here with the finance meeting, we had a restaurant meeting where people could come with suggestions. And then if you said every member, let's say 2,000 of our members spent $40 a month here, that would be like I mean, $40 a month, it would be like 80,000, a month. That would be almost $1 million a year bringing it in. And no longer would we have to subsidize this place if we made it a profit.
Thanks
Thank
for your
you.
feedback. You said no, Dan. You said no.
I know. You can ask my wife. I don't listen very well. So first of all, by the way, I think you guys have done a good job, and it's a challenging environment, and I actually really appreciate the work you've done. Alex, you made me think about this when you commented about the restaurant, the amount that they got to come up with is going to have to be, it's going to be a tougher year for them to try to make those. A lot of these budgets strike me as challenge budgets. So the next reasonable thing there then would be to have those time spread over the year and track those budget against expenditures over the year. Some will be very linear, like salary. Some will be projects rise and drop, and you have those time phase, and track to those and report those back to the finance committee or somebody, or to the board, saying variances and what are we going to do about it? How do we address it? Rather than look at these at touch points once a year. And this is what we experienced and this is why we did it. Are we planning to go to that next phase where we are tracking during the year?
Not only are we have been.
Oh, we have.
It is reported, if you're on the finance committee, they review it monthly, and the primary fiduciary responsibility of the board is to review the financials. And so every month we do look at it. We look at the variance and we discuss
line item by
corrective
line
actions.
item, and the management reports back
account
on
by
the
account.
variances.
Mhm.
Okay.
Mhm. So that's a standard practice. And by the way, if you're interested in ever being on the board, now is the time. We are open taking nominations for the next week. We can still accepting intents to run packets until next week, if you're interested. Great suggestion.
Dan, one more thing. There's way more oversight going on restaurants than there were a year ago. So there's Susan also meets with Laura and Paul. And so there's some financial aspect, not just management. And I just to back up here, there is a new assistant manager that works here. So it's not all Laura anymore. So there is some delegation going on. And there's actually a team of people that only do banquets and only do restaurants. So there is starting to be some separation and so forth as we get better at this. So we are trying hard.
Just a second, the motion on an idea that was mentioned earlier was, have we thought about having a department of efficiency or like the Doge? I was going to call it the Department of POA Efficiency. Have we thought about a committee to look at our efficiency, where we get statistics, we look at the hours open versus the number of staff, the revenue coming in, look at the trends and stats to see, I'll call it Six Sigma type stuff, but there are people in the community with those skills, and we could, maybe collect a few of them together to do a deep dive in any area that the POA desires. It doesn't have to just be the restaurant, but if you're just saying, hey, this is an area we should do a deep dive on, we thought about putting a committee together to do that. That's an extension maybe of the finance committee.
So again, I would say we have the two vehicles that are independent of the POA that do that are the finance committee and the board of directors. Those are the primary accountabilities of both of those bodies. And so if you're interested, we're open to nominations for committee members. We're open to, if you would like to pick up an intent to run packet, they're still available. I haven't mentioned that.
Have we had an independent committee that's just maybe a short term that's just looked at the efficiency of the lodge or the country club and looked for improvement?
Members of our finance committee have done that.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
I'm always on vacation. Matter of fact, I'm going to Paso next week. Okay. Now, on maybe some helpful things on the restaurant. And I used to do that when I was younger, but consistent hours. And if somebody's here and you got too much staff, there's always some youngster that wants to go home or wants to go do something else if they're not busy, right? consistent hours, maybe some winter hours from maybe November to March, April, something like that. And then our summer hours, this place gets packed. So why we're still subsidizing, I don't know. But if we could like somehow come up, and then we eat there a lot. There's some great things on the menu. I can tell you probably what sells the most because we eat there a lot, but you know, the staff and everybody and what you buy for food would tell you what's the most popular items. If there's something that's not selling, ace it and get something else that will, you know, and something that's not too cost effective and people like some inexpensive things on the menu too. So maybe that, but I think this, and then when there's an event like a concert, people get really mad when they come out of the event and they can't go socialize and have another drink. Now, I know that's got some liability issues, but still, we're a restaurant and we're a bar, okay? And we have security staff out front sometimes. So maybe we could redo that so that people just want to know what they can count on. So I came over here today to have dinner at the lodge and forgot they were closed on Tuesday. So we had to go to the country club. But they need to know when we're going to be open and stick to it, you know, and have a little bit more broader. During the day, it's pretty dead because we're not used to being open. But if we ever do that, it should be in the summer and it should be, you know, consistent. It's got to be consistent because people have got to know what to count on when they have guests, things like that. Thank you.
So Jude, I want to address what you said a little bit. We did have summer hours. We spent a lot of money on the lodge. It's a much nicer place to be. People want to be here. So we expanded our hours greatly in the summer. And as business started to die down, we went to winter hours. And it's the first year we had the expanded summer hours, and then maybe people got used to that. And then we cut back and went to winter hours. So there's an adjustment period. We can probably do a better job of communicating when those are. I get the confusion. And I don't want to do too deep a dive on this, but everything that happens in the Canyon Lake POA is subsidized. We all pay. I'm a dues paying member. We all pay dues. Everything that happens here is paid out of our pockets. It's so interesting to me. It's not. I mean, I guess I understand why, but the subsidy for the Lighthouse Restaurant is 2%. Subsidy for the country club is 2%. The golf course, we all pay $149 a year to subsidize the golf course. We're paying $53 a year to subsidize the Lighthouse Restaurant. We're actually paying $81 a year to subsidize the country club. So, and that one's open to the public. This is a private restaurant inside Canyon Lake. We have a limited audience. And I hear people say we should be open more days because we'd make more money. Well, it's a subsidized amenity, and we're all paying $53 a year to keep this private restaurant open and available to us. If we're open more days, we'll have to pay more money. Yes, I get the goal is to bring the subsidy to zero. Not many private restaurants do that. Our job is to provide, in my mind, and I've said this many times over 8 years, our job is to provide the best possible experience for our members at the lowest possible subsidy. And that's what we try to do. And so when we say it doesn't pay for us to be open on Wednesday, it doesn't pay for us to be open at 10, 11 o'clock at night because there's only 3 people there and there's 5 staff, we close because it's a subsidized amenity. And those are controlling costs. And I know it's really frustrating. I want to go eat on Wednesday, but I can't. If we're closed, it's in an effort to save money. It's a subsidy. Every hour we're open costs us money because it's not a for-profit restaurant. We're not Chili's. It's really hard to wrap your head around. It's so frustrating for us, but that's the reality of it. And the country clubs actually, we only hear about the Lighthouse. It's so interesting, but the country club subsidy is more than the Lighthouse, but we never hear anybody complain about the country club. Why is that? I don't know. Maybe because we just spent $3 million on it. So we get a pretty good deal for $350 a month.
Any other comments? Sure.
Sandra. So, one of the things about the restaurant too, because the food at the country club is way better. It's consistent, and the entertainment. If we did that here, and I know she's doing it inside, but I mean like maybe outside. But I've called to order food, and nobody ever answers the phone, and especially during the construction and everything, the phone lines were down. But there's no excuse anymore if I want to call. Like, thank you. Yeah. And then also too, it's like we came here at 3:40 because my son and his wife were excited to have the lunch menu here. Get here at 3:40 and they said, sorry, the lunch menu's done. And she's like, but it says you're open from 12 to 4 for lunch. So that's, like what they're saying with the consistency. And I know that we are subsidizing, but I just love to be able to come and walk over here and eat here. And I want to spend more money here. And I just think it would be nice to have lunch here instead of, the country club. Yeah. But I mean, I think that if you did your committee for the restaurant committee and you advertise like they do, like the women club or, they say, hey, this is happening. Oh, okay, cool. Let's go, here at the restaurant. So but thank you.
That's good feedback. And thank you for that input. And by the way, as you have frustrations and so forth about experiences and like you said, if someone's not answering the phone and such, send the feedback in. And I mean, management has been listening and does respond and make adjustments. You don't always know it because maybe we don't always communicate it back, but if you provide that feedback, it's welcomed and we'll respond. Anyone else? I appreciate the time everyone took. We have a nice full house tonight, which is great. Thank you to everyone who came here. Thank you for being honest with us. Thank you for giving us your opinions and feedback. And again, thanks to our finance committee members who helped this. Also, thanks to staff. Staff really did a terrific job in dealing with a pretty difficult challenge. And so with that, all the information will be provided online. You're welcome to continue to evaluate it, to digest it, to provide your comment and feedback. And we will be voting on this at the March 4th board meeting. Same place, same time on March 4th. With that, is there a motion to adjourn?
So move.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Good night. Thank you, everyone.